Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this Monday. How are you? Hope you had a great weekend. And I wanted to talk today about the collapse of the American justice system. And it's close to my heart because I have a law degree, and there was a point in my life where I really wanted to get involved in the mainstream. And what I've found since is very troubling, no matter if I'm personally involved as an attorney or not. What I'm talking about is this two-tier justice system that's being displayed to all the American people on all of the cable news channels, as well as the mainstream channels like ABC, CBS, NBC. And really what's happening is you're seeing a justice system that's operating not on the principle of equality under the law, but on the principle of who you know and what party you're affiliated with. And very simply, if you're a Republican, and of worse, if you're a Trump supporter, you're an open target now for the justice system and the special prosecutor that is looking into what? Looking into collusion of Trump and Russia, supposedly, now for almost 2 years. Collusion first is not a crime. And usually a special prosecutor should be looking, should have a crime and not create one by basically investigating. And that's exactly what's happening. And you're seeing a lot of people, the dominoes in the conviction category on the Trump side are now 5 being charged with process crimes, nothing related to Russian collusion, but things that Mueller, the special prosecutor, has found out basically on testimony where you bring somebody in, and then if they forget something that happened 10 years ago and testify otherwise, they'll charge him with lying to Congress, lying to the feds, etc., etc. And you're seeing this being used over and over again with people affiliated with Trump. And what makes it even worse is that if you look at the other side of the coin, the Clinton side of the coin, they're ignoring everything. And it's right out there for the American people to see. I'm not going to go through the laundry list of people on the Clinton side that have not even been investigated, not given immunity, and basically testifying, lying. I can name 10 people on the Clinton side who've lied to Congress and nothing happens. But yet you get a guy like General Flynn, who when you look at his case, it's as flimsy as can be. He's facing prison time. Now, you also have a guy by the name of Paul Manafort. Then you have the recent one, Roger Stone, on the Trump side, who was treated like a mafia boss for a process crime. If you looked at what the media did, and this is where you're seeing now the media collusion with the special prosecutor's office, and they send 29 armed FBI agents at 6 a.m. to arrest a 66-year-old man with no guns in his house, a deaf wife, a dog and his cat, 2 cats, 2 dogs, and made a spectacle out of it. And just so happens CNN was on the scene for the early morning raid. And they said that they had some information from a grand jury proceeding in Washington. Well, listen, that was BS because grand jury proceedings are private. How do they know? Basically, they were called by the FBI, Mueller's team, to be there to witness this, and it was a shock and awe kind of thing. At a point when all they had to do was contact Roger Stone's attorney and he would have walked in and presented himself to the FBI. So it's a real sham, and they're doing this. And the important thing is to understand that you have crimes, more evidence of wrongdoing on the Clinton side. That's overlooked, and now the whole emphasis is on certain underlings to get to Trump. Now, why are they doing this? This is nothing new. But it's getting to a point where they want to show the American people that the justice system in America is basically in the control of the globalists. And you have no choice. You basically better get in line, or they're going to sick people on you. Like who? There's a great case I'm going to refer to, and very rarely do I I always look at the mainstream or Fox News or CNN to see what they're doing. But yesterday I watched a real interesting segment with a man by the name of Mark Levin, who is a staunch right-wing broadcaster, and he has a show on Saturday and Sunday on Fox, and he brought on an attorney who was involved with defending Arthur Andersen back in the day when they brought Arthur Andersen's firm down to its knees and dismantled it, basically. Now, let me give you an idea. A guy by the name of Andrew Weissman, who was handpicked by Mueller to be in the special prosecutor's office, is basically going to write the report. Now, this guy, according to the attorney who was on the other side of the Andersen case, is a real miserable son of a bee. And what I mean by that is this guy has been doing this kind of prosecuting, this basically lying to get convictions and targeting people who really don't fit what the globalists are looking for. And this guy is a real scumbag. Now, he's been doing this. We'll go back to the days of Arthur Andersen. And you're going to see, when I play this 12-minute clip by this attorney, what I'm talking about. But let me give you a little background here. Arthur Andersen was the gold standard in accounting firms. In fact, this is a great story. My brother, who went to the University of Florida with a business degree, his first job was in Houston, and he met his wife, who was an accountant, both working for Arthur Andersen. A great start, right? Well, he left Arthur Andersen and went on to other things. But let me tell you something. And basically, if he stayed long enough, he'd have had to leave because they put Arthur Andersen out of business. And you remember the whole Arthur Andersen Enron scandal. Now, who was prosecuting that? It was Andrew Weissman. Who's prosecuting now for the special? Who's working as the right-hand man for Robert Mueller? It's Andrew Weissman. Now, Arthur, if you don't remember this, why did Arthur Andersen go out of business? Well, after 89 years in business, like I said, the gold standard in accounting, a very reputable firm, ended its role as auditor of public companies. The Chicago-based company was convicted in June of back in 2002, I believe, of obstruction of justice for shredding and doctoring documents related to the Enron audits. Okay? Now, when was what really? Let me give you this little thought. Now, supposing in this country you're innocent after proven guilty. Well, guess what? Arthur Andersen was convicted in the district courts. He went up on appeal to the federal appeals court, and they upheld the conviction. But it didn't stop there. And in a very rare unanimous decision, 9-0, Supreme Court takes this case and throws out Arthur Andersen conviction. In a rare unanimous decision, the Supreme Court overturned a Weissman prosecution, the conviction of Arthur Andersen, accounting for destroying documents related to their client Enron in the early days of the scandal. But by that time, Arthur Andersen had already been destroyed. And he lost all of his accounts, because he was convicted in the D.C. in the federal court, the lower court. He lost everything. And does Arthur Andersen still exist? No. They went out of business, like I said, after 89 years as the gold standard. And basically what happened here was there was, again, a corrupt prosecutor going after somebody and a firm that they wanted to bring down. And they used these obstruction of justice process crimes to do it. And guess what happened? They succeeded. And there's stories about Arthur Andersen going out of business. There's stories about, Arthur Andersen's role, but it was all overturned. This firm was convicted of obstruction of justice for shedding documents related to Enron, resulting in the Enron scandal. Although the Supreme Court reversed the firm's conviction, the impact of the scandal combined with the findings of criminal complicity in the lower courts ultimately destroyed the firm. So basically what happened is Weissman and his crew got his way. And they're doing the same thing today. Now, what about Enron? How many jobs were lost in the Enron scandal, which shouldn't have happened because of Weissman? Thousands and thousands of workers lost their jobs. Some 4,000 Enron employees were let go after the company declared bankruptcy. How many lost their jobs at Arthur Andersen? When eventually the Supreme Court said, hey, this was no crime. The AFL-CIO estimates that 28,500 workers lost their jobs from Enron, WorldCom, and accounting firm Arthur Andersen alone. And now we're putting in the hands of the special prosecutor, a guy like Weissman, who will be basically editing every word of that report coming out about Trump. Why is Trump allowing this? Because he works with them. This is a scam. Look, he didn't have to put in Jeff Sessions, who did nothing as an attorney general. He could have controlled that, but he basically said, I have to recuse myself, leading the way for Mueller to come in. And another one of his cronies, the assistant attorney general, a guy by the name of Rothstein, or Rosenstein, to basically allow it to continue. So basically, after 2 years now of all of this wrangling, Trump could have put a kibosh to it in the beginning by getting rid and starting over with the Justice Department, but he didn't. He allowed this to continue, and they did it for a reason. Because they want to show you, both the left and the right, that there is no justice in this country. Because Trump had every chance to correct this in the beginning. But what happens? They go on a phony witch hunt to find collusion with Trump when you can look and find collusion with Clinton if you're a first-year law student. And what about her giving away 20% of the uranium? What about her bleach bidding her computers and destroying emails and having a private server with government secrets? That is felonies right there. Enough to bring an indictment. But what happens? They allowed Comey to be there, an FBI director. He could have gotten rid of him immediately the first day he was in office, but he didn't. And Comey now creates this big, huge brouhaha by saying, there are so many, there are crimes here. We've got all the elements of the crime against Hillary Clinton, but no prosecutor would bring this case. He wasn't a prosecutor. He was an FBI director. Shouldn't be making that call. But that's what's happening. And why was he there in the beginning? Because Trump let him be there, because they're playing a game with you. Otherwise, he'd have gotten rid of him. Okay, let's look at another issue. And we'll get back to Enron and Mr. Weissman in the special prosecutor's office right now, who's been a hack for years doing, how many people did he hurt with this phony conviction of Enron? And who went to jail, by the way, in Enron? Ultimately, though, former Enron Jeffrey Skilling received the harshest sentence of anyone involved in Enron. Skilling was convicted of conspiracy, fraud, and insider trading, right? Well, there's a whole bunch of stories here about a number of the Enron people that were basically found innocent after Weissman, brought down the hammer. There was even an Enron executive who killed himself over this. Now listen, Anderson was basically singled out, and they wanted him gone. I don't know exactly for what reasons, and they used the Federal Bureau of Investigation along with the Justice Department through Weissman to do this. And he's very adept at bringing these crimes and using the media to convict people before they get a fair trial. And in the case of Anderson, it was too late when the Supreme Court took the case, right? So this whole Enron deal and Arthur Anderson is an amazing story. So this was going on. Weissman's been doing this for years, and now he's in the highest office prosecuting a duly elected president of the United States, or looking for crimes that they haven't found anything. They're like on a search for a crime and then convict. But anyway, look at what's happening at the border. The same thing. And you asked me, why don't I support Trump or Clinton or America? Make America great again. Well, listen, I support the U.S. But if you can't see the collusion if there is collusion, it's between the Democrat and the Republican Party against the American people. Now, I guess that's not a crime. But if you don't see how they work together, because Trump, when he came in there, he had a Republican Congress and a Republican Senate. 2 years ago, they could have passed border security and got enough money for the wall, but who blocked it? Paul Ryan, a Wisconsin Republican, who was the Speaker of the House. And that was his job. And what did he do in those 2 years? Basically block getting rid of Obamacare, which is terrible because they don't want to ever get back to medicine in the hands of private doctors. They're going to eventually get to, government-sponsored, full-blown, doctor care, health care, just like they have in other socialist states, or just like they have in Canada, etc., which doesn't work. But that's where they're moving. Otherwise, they'd have gotten rid of it in the 2 years that Trump had. But they didn't do that. They also didn't deal with border security. And now you're seeing this crazy fight between the Democrats and the Republicans, the Demopublicans, or you can call them the Republicats. They're all the same, playing this game with the American people, because in the end, they're not going to get border security. They're going to get as many people in here to basically disrupt America as they can. And eventually what will happen is, now you have this big call for the 2020 election. And what you're going to see now is an advent of socialism creeping in to the American debate. Now, we all know socialism was created by who? The Jesuits, yes. And they did that with the Paraguay experiments in the 1600s. Now, socialism, communism, I'm using, it was actually communism, but socialism is in their bailiwick as well. So, and you've seen how socialist countries basically don't work. And now you have congressmen, these liberal congressmen orchestrated, coming into Congress and actually saying things like they want a 70% tax rate. They want to raise taxes so high. And what about what happened, in the Revolutionary War? At least on the surface, one of the issues was that we were being taxed 2 or 3% by Britain, and that was too much. Well, where's that gone? So we have this American experiment going on, and now we're seeing socialism creep into the discussion. Why? Because in the end, that is going to be what's going to happen in America. It's going to be a fascist socialist state, and they're moving towards that. This is the last vestige. Make America great again. That's why you're seeing all of these media scandals supposedly against good Americans who basically want a sovereign country. And the media is now blatantly, outside of the left-handed media, the right media with Fox, has really just taken sides. And that is not the place for the media. I heard a football coach the other day make an argument, and he said this. He said, the media should be more or less like a referee, in a football game. And a referee should look at the facts and make the right decision and tell the American people both sides. But the media now has not been a referee, almost like that referee who, remember in the New Orleans and that blown call? I mean, that's an example. If the referees aren't fair, and how could anybody miss that call? And he was fined, $27,000? But that doesn't change the outcome. It maybe change the outcome of the game. So if you don't have a fair referee in the media, what do you got? The media has now taken sides with the Democrats and socialism. And so you're seeing America being ripped apart. So I'm going back to the Arthur Andersen case because it's an example of what they're doing to businesses in this country, even though Trump is stating we're bringing people back. But we have a Justice Department that can take anybody down they want. And the perfect example is the Arthur Andersen case, leading up now to Mueller's special prosecutors open, they've given him, he's basically the most powerful guy in the country right now. And what's happening? There's no equal justice being meted out, and they want the American people to see that. Because what is a better way to destroy a country? To say to an American, look, if you don't follow the line of Hillary Clinton and us, we can get you anytime we want. And that's what they're doing slowly but surely. And Roger Stone's his arrest the other day was a perfect example of shock and awe and fear into people. Man, are they going to raid my house at 6 a.m? So we have this case of Arthur Andersen that I brought up with the Supreme Court unanimously said, boy, you guys screwed up. But in the meantime, 28,000 people minimum lost their jobs. Arthur Andersen's firm, the gold standard of accounting, was disbanded. And so really, there should have been an outcry. What is Weissman still doing in one of the highest offices of our country? Because Trump lets it go on. He's a pawn, and he's allowing this to happen. He doesn't need those people. He could have fired them immediately. But he didn't. And that's what tells me, and should tell you, despite all the stories I do about the connection to the Vatican, that should tell you that there is a two-tier justice system, and each political party works in a kind of the Hegelian dialectic method of fighting against one another, but getting the synthesis in the end, which will be an unfair justice system, attacking good American people who want sovereignty and a free country. And their outcome will be a socialist fascist state leading to a new world order globalist country, which is basically happening right before your eyes. So in the second half hour, I want to play that 12-minute clip of that attorney talking about Weissman and really who he is. And that should give you an idea of one of the most cherished things in our country was a justice system that was equal. But it hasn't been that way for a long, long time. And it's only as good as the people that are running it, right? Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, back for the second half hour, folks, and I want to get back to this interview that was done yesterday on Fox. I rarely do this, but it was a great interview with a former federal attorney, and we'll get some really inside information about the Mueller investigation, as well as how far this goes back to Arthur Anderson. And the prosecutor in the Anderson case is the same one working with Mueller as Mueller's right-hand man. And he's stuck with this guy Weissman for, better part of 20 years. And he always seems to be there in these kind of cases. And he shouldn't be. And you'll listen to this attorney tell you why. Now, as far as what I said about Enron and Arthur Anderson, they were intermingled. But I was specifically talking about how Arthur Anderson was treated. And the Enron case is, considered to be one of the most complicated white-collar cases that lasted 5 years. And at its peak, Enron was worth about $70 billion. So I don't want to get into that and see the discrepancies there. The head of Enron, Skilling, got, 24 years in jail? And I'll leave Enron for another time. But I was specifically talking about Arthur Anderson and how that farm got caught up into a scandal and basically was exonerated by the Supreme Court after it was dismantled. So let me go to this video that I have on the interview done yesterday on a show called Mark Levin, Life, Liberty, and Levin on Fox. Okay, I'll give you a little intro here. The interview's with an attorney, Sidney Powell. She is the author of License to Lie, examines Andrew Weissman's role in the prosecution of Enron and the destruction of Arthur Anderson. It's a good interview because it leads into what he's doing now, along with Robert Mueller in the special prosecutor's office. So anyway, let's get to that right now, and I'm going to put that on for you. So let's do that right now.
You also have been lead counsel in more than 500 federal appeals, 350 of them as the assistant United States attorney, and appellate section chief in the Western and Northern Districts of Texas. I just want our audience to know how significant that is, how impressive that is, because there's a lot of brilliant assistant United States attorneys in it. And you were one of them. Thank you. And I want to take a very, very close look at Robert Mueller's office. A lot of people focus on Robert Mueller, and they should. But this Svengalian there, my word, is the number 2 guy who Mueller relies on for everything, Andrew Weissman. So let's focus a little bit on Andrew Weissman so the American people know who he is and knows who really is the, in many cases, the Wizard of Oz. Tell us about Andrew Weissman.
Well, I have called Mr. Weissman the poster boy for prosecutorial misconduct because Mueller had a role in handpicking him for head of the Enron task force and appointing him to that position.
And what was Mueller at the time?
Mueller was in the FBI at the time.
The director of the FBI.
Yes.
So he picks Weissman to handle the Enron case.
Yes. Weissman was deputy director at the time when they first started under Leslie Caldwell, who was the chief of the Enron task force when it was first created in the collapse of Enron. So they set about and targeted Arthur Andersen to begin with, the venerable accounting firm.
So they're investigating him?
Yes.
And they target Arthur Andersen?
Yes.
For what?
For destroying evidence, is what they called it. But they did it by making up a crime, by combining 2 separate statutes to create a crime out of something that wasn't. So they destroyed Arthur Andersen. They knew they were going to destroy the company. They sealed.
How did they destroy Arthur Andersen?
By indicting it.
They indict Arthur Andersen because they're the financial advisors to Enron.
Exactly. They were the auditors and financial advisors to Enron.
And they manufacture a crime by combining 2 different statutes.
Exactly.
And at that time, how many people worked for Arthur?
85,000 people worked for Arthur.
85,000 people. And Weissman was the lead investigator.
He was the lead prosecutor on that case.
And he reported, in part, he informed the director of the FBI at the time, Mueller.
Yes.
Well, what did they do?
Well, they knew they were going to destroy the company when they indicted it because Andersen represented 2,500 publicly traded companies. And no auditor who represents publicly traded companies can function as an auditor when they're indicted. So they sealed the indictment for a week while they...
They indict them? Seal the indictment for a week?
Yes.
That's absolute disaster for accountants, auditors, financial advisors.
Yes.
Okay.
And they worked behind the scenes during that week to avoid upheaval in the markets, so that when they announce the indictment and unseal it publicly, the markets are not as disrupted as they would have been if they had just indicted them publicly immediately.
What did they indict Arthur Andersen for?
They indicted them under a witness tampering statute. And the way they did it, they essentially took criminal intent out of the process. And in fact, when the Supreme Court later got the case, Justice Rehnquist wrote the decision for the for the unanimous Supreme Court, and said it was shocking how little criminal culpability the jury instructions had required, and that the Andersen had not committed a crime at the time.
So Andersen gets caught up in the Enron case. Weissman must know that there wasn't mens rea, or criminal culpability. He indicts the entity, which for a major international corporation is a disaster to begin with, because then you get documents subpoenaed and so forth. You have to be searching your computers and your records here and all over the world and so forth. So it creates great tumult in a company.
Completely.
And that in and of itself, depending on the nature of the subpoenas and the indictment and so forth, can freeze a company. And so here's this company, Arthur Andersen, that's in the business of protecting other companies. They're auditors, they're accountants, they're financial advisors. And they're being accused of what? Witness tampering?
Yes, and obstruction of justice under 2 different statutes that combined created this new offense because there wasn't one. Anderson had not been subpoenaed for any documents at the time. Anderson was cleaning up his files and proceeding to get ready for the investigation. So they just made up a new offense by combining the two different statutes.
Now, you call the name of the federal trial judge that was involved in the case?
Melinda Harmon in Houston.
Melinda Harmon in Houston. And then I assume they appealed it?
Anderson did appeal it.
What happened on appeal?
The Fifth Circuit affirmed it on appeal.
Affirmed it. Then they appeal it to the United States Supreme Court, which takes the case, which is relatively rare.
Yes.
And the justices look at this. You mentioned Rehnquist, and they say, wait a minute. There's no criminal intent. There's no criminal culpability. This isn't even really a statute. The instructions were faulty. And what did the Supreme Court rule?
They reversed it unanimously.
Unanimously. Every justice said no.
Exactly.
What happened to Mr. Weissman since he led the case?
Oh, absolutely nothing. Mr. Weissman went on to become director of the Enron Task Force. In fact, he had already, by the time Anderson was reversed, he had already turned his sights on the Merrill Lynch defendants in what was called the Enron or Nigerian barge case, and indicted 4 Merrill Lynch executives on a multi-count indictment in which they also made up a crime.
I want to get to that in a minute. What happened to Anderson?
Anderson was destroyed the minute it was indicted.
It collapsed.
It collapsed. Not only was it under criminal indictment, so it lost all its clients, but I think 160 civil plaintiffs piled on in multiple lawsuits.
So it was crushed. All those people lost their jobs.
Exactly.
Investors lost all their money.
All the partners lost their money.
They lost everything. On a case that was reversed 9-0 by the United States Supreme Court that Mr. Weissman was in charge of.
Yes, and Anderson had been known to be the hallmark, the benchmark for accounting standards. Anderson was the gold standard for accounting, a venerable accounting firm.
Merrill Lynch, you mentioned. Was Weissman involved in that?
Oh, yes.
What happened to Merrill Lynch?
Merrill Lynch was indicted, well, not the company, but I think one of the reasons they indicted Anderson was to send a message to other companies that if they knocked on your door, if the Enron Task Force knocked on your door, you'd better cooperate, or you could be destroyed and given the death penalty just like Anderson was.
Even if you don't know anything and you didn't do it?
Exactly.
That's the power.
That is the power.
That a handful of prosecutors have.
Yes.
And you even see it today with the indictments, where Mueller hands down indictments. It's all one-sided. People need to understand the other side doesn't have any say in it. They haven't had a chance to respond to it. Nothing's happened, but a group of government lawyers have decided to charge somebody or some entity with crimes. That's the beginning of the process. It's not the end of the process. And I want to pursue this with you a little bit more later, because the media treat it as, well, that's it. But I want to talk about these executives with Merrill Lynch. What happened to them?
Well, essentially, Merrill Lynch offered them up as sacrificial lambs and entered into a non-prosecution agreement with the government on behalf of Merrill Lynch, the company, that was extremely onerous. In fact, they agreed to have an overseer from the Enron Task Force installed in Merrill Lynch for a period of 18 months to oversee everything, including the bills that the defense lawyers were submitting. They agreed that no Merrill Lynch employee could say anything that contradicted the government's view of the prosecution, which was absolutely astounding and I think illegal. And then the Merrill Lynch executives...
So the government secretes itself within the company it's investigating.
Yes.
To oversee the bills that they're paying their defense counsel.
Yes. And everything else that's going on in the company.
Sounds thoroughly unconstitutional. These 4 executives are indicted. What happens to them?
Their lives are destroyed. They went through a 10-year period of unmitigated hell. There was the investigation, and then they're indicted, and then they face trial. The trial was a circus. I detail it at length in my book.
This book?
Yes.
License to Lie.
Yes. They were tried in Houston in the wake of the Enron collapse.
People were angry.
People were furious. Anderson had just been convicted, so there was all the uproar about that. all of Houston was in turmoil because of the collapse.
So what happened to these four?
They were all convicted. The lawyers for the defense were like deer in headlights most of the time. They were blindsided at every turn.
By the government?
By the government. They had made repeated requests for what's called Brady material. Because the government holds all the cards in a criminal prosecution, the government is legally, constitutionally, and ethically required to produce any evidence that is favorable to the defense, that is within the government's possession or within its reach. Oh no, they steadfastly denied that there was any such Brady material. When the defense kept making demand after demand after demand, the judge at the time, Judge Ewing Werline, who was assigned the Merrill Lynch case, finally made the government produce a list of people that they had admitted might have some Brady material, and then upon further demand, he finally ordered the government to produce summaries of that material.
When we come back, I want to know ultimately what happened to these four executives, and I want to continue to examine Mr. Weissman, because it's very, very crucial. And beyond that, how the special counsel's office is operating.
Okay, I just wanted to interrupt and then continue with the last part of this interview, or at least most of it.
Sidney Powell. So 4 executives at Merrill Lynch were prosecuted by Weissman and his team after he had finished with pretty much Anderson. The company is collapsing. He's going after Merrill Lynch. They've secreted themselves into the operations of Merrill Lynch. You can look at everything from what the defense counsel is charging, which is really quite exceptional. And 4 men are charged, executives. They're convicted?
Yes, they were indicted for conspiring to defraud Enron of the honest services of Andrew Fastow.
Okay. What happened? I assume they appealed?
They were all convicted. They did appeal. And on appeal, the Fifth Circuit reversed 12 out of the 14 counts of conviction. They reversed all the honest services counts against all the Merrill Lynch defendants and the related wire fraud counts.
So let's be clear, in plain English. So all the counts relating to their work with Enron and so forth were reversed?
Yes. All the honest services fraud charges were reversed. The conspiracy and the wire fraud charges, yes. Because they were not valid charges, the defendant's conduct was not criminal. But the real atrocity was that these men, at the urging of Mr. Weissman and his Enron task force cohorts, were sent to prison upon their conviction.
So they didn't wait for the appeal. They immediately sent them off to federal prison. What kind of federal prison?
The youngest Merrill Lynch defendant was sent to a maximum security federal transfer facility with the worst of the worst criminals in the country.
You know, when I was chief of staff to the Attorney General, I saw some of these facilities. I saw Marion, which is a final top security prison. Why would they send this gentleman to a maximum security prison where we have terrorists, mass murderers, mobsters, gang bosses, the worst of the worst, in order to break them?
Yes. They did the worst things they could possibly do to these men in the system.
And that's Weissman. Weissman had to ask the Federal Bureau of Prisons to put that man in that place. Because if he didn't ask him, he wouldn't be in that place.
And that young man was completely acquitted on appeal.
He was completely acquitted on appeal. How long did he serve?
8 months away from his 2 young children and family in absolute unmitigated hell.
So you say 12 of the 14 were reversed. What were the other 2 counts?
The other 2 counts were absolutely appalling. My client was convicted and still stands convicted on 2 counts of perjury and obstruction of justice for testifying about his personal understanding of a telephone call he was not even on after Mr. Weissman in the grand jury told him to share his personal understanding of that phone call, whether it was accurate or not.
Well, this is interesting. Isn't that sort of the way they want to catch the President of the United States?
Exactly.
And yet, How many years ago was this?
This was 16, 18 years ago.
And this connection between Mueller and Weissman, 2 decades.
At least 2 decades.
Does he treat him almost like a child, like a son? He seems to bring Weissman with him wherever he goes, including as director of the FBI.
He did. He has been promoting and protecting Mr. Weissman for at least 2 decades.
He's appointed special counsel, and his immediate first choice is Andrew Weissman to be his top lieutenant.
That's right.
I want to get into the treatment of the president by Mueller, Weissman, and team, but first I want to talk about Manafort. Last time I heard he was in solitary confinement in the federal prison.
Yes, he is.
Same treatment as the Merrill Lynch gentleman. Now, he was convicted by a jury in Virginia on multiple counts. Now they're back in D.C. trying to get more counts piled on. There have been reports that Manafort's depressed, that he's pretty broken. This is par for the course, isn't it? You know, you have a prosecution, you have conviction, and you move on to your next case. You were involved in a lot of cases.
Yes.
Assistant U.S. Attorney for 9 different U.S. attorneys. This is different, though. This is really like a blood sport for Mr. Weissman, isn't it?
Oh, it definitely is, yes.
So they're dragging him back into Washington, D.C. in front of an Obama judge, Mr. Chief Justice. And yes, it does make a difference. In front of an Obama judge who's very receptive, apparently, to the special counsel's arguments, and has been repeatedly.
Oh, yeah, she's the one that remanded Mr. Manafort to custody immediately upon their request and is allowing them to pile on the additional charges.
And when you look at the case involving Anderson, Merrill Lynch, these 4 executives, and Manafort, like I said, it's almost as if it's not that they have more to offer. It's that there's almost an obsession, an odd desire to destroy these people, not just punish them, but to break them into 1,000 pieces.
That's exactly what it is. And Mr. Weissman did the same thing to another person not ascribed and licensed to lie, and that was young Enron treasurer Ben Glisson, who wanted to just plead guilty to a crime that he admitted he committed in one of Fastow's schemes and then reported to prison to serve his time. Mr. Weissman wanted him to cooperate and testify against other people. Well, Glisson just wanted to do his time and be done with it. So what happened when this young man, 30-something years old, reported to prison? He found himself immediately put into solitary confinement, which is a cell barely large enough to stand up in with a slit for light. You're caged like an animal for 23 hours a day. And he was completely broken. They left him there for almost 2 weeks and then put him in the general prison population. Solitary will drive a sane man insane within 24 hours.
I want to talk about this. I want to bring in and I don't much care what the Mueller report has to say. There needs to be another report on what took place when President Trump was candidate Trump, President Trump was President-elect Trump, and then shortly after he became President Trump. There is a stream of factual information that the media essentially reject. But facts are facts that demonstrate that the Obama administration, at the highest levels, the FBI, we haven't even gotten into the intelligence agencies unmasking individuals like Lieutenant General Flynn. We had a rush to unmask individuals in the last year of the Obama administration like we've never seen before in American history. People have not been pursued in that regard. We had the Hillary Clinton campaign. Earlier this week there was information that 5 or 6 surrogates of the Clinton campaign were pushing this dossier into the FBI, and among others, Baker, the general counsel, who's now out under criminal investigation, got a copy. Others also received copies of it because it turns out the Clinton campaign and the DNC, through their straw men and all the rest, they funded this operation. They funded the opposition research, and they pushed it into the FBI, into a friendly senior level of the FBI run by the Obama administration and the Loretta Lynch Justice Department. Now, Mr. Weissman, it turns out, based on this earlier reporting by John Solomon this week, was among several who were told by Bruce Orr, for America, he served on the staff of the Deputy Attorney General, very senior position. I had the position once. The Deputy Attorney General was an Obama holdover at some point. She became the Attorney General, Sally Yates, extremely partisan and a friend of Andrew Weissman's, as a matter of fact. And Weissman, before he goes into the special counsel, is one of the individuals who Bruce Orr tells, according to his testimony to Congress in closed session, this dossier, look, my wife works for Fusion GPS, which, secured the dossier, and just be careful about it, because it is involved in opposition research, and there are political aspects to it. So they developed this application that they filed with the FISA court, had a tiny little footnote in there, which nobody read, including the federal judge who sits there as a FISA court judge, rather than explaining what this dossier is. Because they want to ultimately investigate the man who becomes President of the United States, Donald Trump. Not Carter Page, not Manafort, they want Trump. And they get their FISA warrant. And they get it extended 3 times. Not once are these judges told.
Okay, I have to cut it off there. There's another half hour to this interview, and I'll talk more tomorrow. So come back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.